The crumbling Victorian loomed before me, a black silhouette against the moonlit sky. I've delivered pizzas to some sketchy places before, but this was something else entirely. As I killed the engine, an uneasy silence settled over me. The house seemed to watch, waiting. My name's Jake, and I've been slinging pizzas for Geno's for about 6 months now. It's not glamorous work, but it pays the bills while I finish up my degree. Most nights are pretty routine. Drunk college kids, harried parents, the occasional stoner looking to satisfy the munchies. But tonight was different from the moment that order came in. It was close to closing time when the call came through. I was wiping down counters, already dreaming about crawling into bed, when Marla, our night dispatcher, called out to me. "Jake, got one last run for you. 1313 Mockingbird Lane." I groaned. "Seriously, it's almost midnight." Marla shrugged, her eyes never leaving her phone. "Hey, money's money, right? Besides, it's a big order. Tip should be good." Sighing, I grabbed the hot bags and headed out. It wasn't until I was halfway there that I realized exactly where I was going. Mockingbird Lane was on the outskirts of town, an old street lined with Victorian-era houses that had seen better days. Most were abandoned now, waiting for either renovation or demolition. As I turned onto the street, a chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the autumn air. Bare tree branches clawed at the sky, and a thin mist hugged the ground. The whole scene looked like something out of a low-budget horror flick. I double-checked the address on my phone. 1313 Mockingbird Lane. This had to be some kind of joke, right? The house stood apart from its neighbors, set back from the road behind a rusted iron gate. Peeling paint, boarded-up windows, sagging porch. It was the very picture of abandonment. For a long moment I sat there, engine idling, debating whether to just call it in and head back to the shop. But curiosity, and if I'm being honest, the promise of a decent tip got the better of me. I grabbed the pizzas and made my way to the gate. It creaked open at my touch, the sound unnaturally loud in the still night air. Each step up the overgrown path felt like a mistake, leaves crunching beneath my feet. As I approached the porch, the wood groaned under my weight. I raised my hand to knock, but before my knuckles could touch the peeling paint, I froze. There, in one of the boarded-up windows, I could have sworn I saw movement. Just a flicker, there and gone, like a shadow passing behind frosted glass. My heart pounding, I called out, "Hello? Pizza delivery!" Silence. I was about to turn and run when I heard it. A soft scraping sound from inside the house. Then, ever so slowly, the door began to open. I stood there, transfixed, as the gap widened. The darkness beyond seemed absolute, swallowing what little moonlight managed to reach the porch. And then, from that inky blackness, came a voice. "Come in," it rasped, barely above a whisper. "I've been waiting for you." Every instinct screamed at me to run, to drop the pizzas and sprint back to my car. But something, call it morbid curiosity or sheer stupidity, kept me rooted to the spot. I have your order here," I managed to stammer. 3 large pepperoni and a 2-liter of Coke. That'll be $47.50. A dry chuckle emanated from the darkness. "Money? Oh, I have something far more valuable to offer you, Jake." The use of my name sent a jolt through me. I hadn't introduced myself. How did they know who I was? "Look, I should really get going," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'll just leave the pizzas here and—" "No!" The voice grew sharper, more insistent. "You must come inside. Please, I need your help." Against my better judgment, I took a step forward, peering into the gloom. As my eyes adjusted, I could make out the faint outline of a figure just beyond the threshold. They seemed to be hunched over, leaning heavily on something. A cane, maybe. "Are you okay?" I asked. "Do you need me to call someone?" Another chuckle, this one tinged with what sounded like genuine amusement. "Oh, Jake, always so eager to help others. It's what I've always admired about you." A chill ran through me. "What are you talking about? Who are you?" The figure shifted slightly, and for a brief moment I caught a glimpse of their face in a stray beam of moonlight. It was gaunt, almost skeletal, with sunken eyes that seemed to glow with an inner light. "I've gone by many names over the years," they said. "But you, Jake, you used to call me Grandpa." I stumbled backward, nearly dropping the pizzas. "That's impossible. My grandfather died when I was a kid." "Did I?" The figure took a halting step forward. "Or is that just what they told you?" My mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. This had to be some kind of sick joke, right? A prank set up by my coworkers, maybe? "I don't know what kind of game you're playing," I said, my voice shaking despite my attempt at bravado. "But I'm leaving." Now, I turned to go, but before I could take a step, I felt a hand on my arm. The grip was ice cold and far stronger than I would have expected from such a frail-looking figure. "Please, Jake," the voice pleaded. "I know this is hard to believe, but I need you to listen. There's so much you don't know, so much I have to tell you." I tried to pull away, but the grip only tightened. "Let go of me." "You have a birthmark," the voice continued urgently. "On your left shoulder blade. It's shaped like a crescent moon. Your mother always said it was a sign you were meant for great things." I froze. He was right. About the birthmark, about what my mom used to say. It wasn't the kind of thing a random stranger could know. How do you know that?" I whispered. The figure's other hand came up, gently turning me to face them. In the dim light, I could see their eyes more clearly now. They were a pale, milky blue, just like my grandfather's had been. "Because I was there the day you were born," they said softly. "I held you in my arms and made a promise to always protect you. A promise I'm trying to keep even now." My head swam with confusion and disbelief. This couldn't be real. And yet, "If you're really my grandfather," I said slowly, "then why are you here? Why now?" The figure, my grandfather, sighed heavily. "Because time is running out, Jake. For me, for you, for everyone. There are forces at work in this world that you can't begin to imagine. Forces that have been shaping your life since before you were born." He gestured towards the open door. "Please, come inside. I'll explain everything." I hesitated, torn between my instinct for self-preservation and an inexplicable feeling that I needed to hear what he had to say. In that moment of indecision, a gust of wind swept across the porch, carrying with it the scent of ozone and something else. Something old and musty, like long-forgotten books. "All right," I heard myself say, as if from a great distance. "I'll listen. But I'm not coming inside. We can talk out here." A look of relief passed over the old man's face. "Thank you, Jake. You don't know how much this means." We sat on the creaking porch steps, the pizza boxes between us like some sort of bizarre picnic. As my grandfather, and I was becoming increasingly convinced that's who he really was, began to speak, the world around us seemed to fade away. He told me of secret societies and ancient prophecies, of a hidden war that had been raging for centuries. He spoke of my true heritage, of powers lying dormant within me that I'd never known existed. With each word, my understanding of the world shifted and expanded. Hours passed like minutes. The moon traversed the sky, and the first hints of dawn began to color the horizon. As my grandfather's tale drew to a close, I sat in stunned silence, trying to process everything I'd heard. "I know it's a lot to take in," he said gently, "but you needed to know the truth. The choices you make from here on out will shape not just your future, but the future of the world." I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could form the words, a shrill beeping cut through the air. My phone. I pulled it out of my pocket to see a string of missed calls and messages from work. Reality came crashing back. I'd been sitting here for hours, completely losing track of time. I scrambled to my feet, nearly knocking over the long, cold pizza boxes. I have to go," I stammered. "My boss is going to kill me." My grandfather nodded, understanding. "Go, but remember what I've told you, and Jake?" He fixed me with those piercing blue eyes. "Be careful who you trust." I practically ran back to my car, my mind reeling. As I pulled away from the curb, I glanced in my rearview mirror. The old Victorian stood silent and dark, no sign of life visible. Had it all been real, or some sort of stress-induced hallucination? As I turned onto the main road, Heading back towards town and normalcy, I couldn't shake the feeling that my life had irrevocably changed. Whatever the truth was, I knew one thing for certain. This was one pizza delivery I'd never forget. The clock on my dashboard flicked to 3 a.m., and right on cue, my phone buzzed. 5th night in a row. Same address, same order. But tonight, something was going to change. Tonight, I was going to find out what was really going on at 742 Evergreen Terrace. My name's Sarah, and I've been working the graveyard shift at Slice of Heaven Pizza for about 3 months now. It's not exactly glamorous, but the tips are decent, and the quiet hours give me time to study for my nursing exams. At least that's how it usually goes. Lately, though, my nights have been anything but quiet. It started last Monday. A call came in at exactly 3 a.m. Not unusual for our 24-hour joint, but still rare enough to raise an eyebrow. The order was simple. 1 large cheese pizza, no extras. The address was in one of those upscale neighborhoods on the outskirts of town. Again, not unheard of, but not our usual late-night crowd. I remember pulling up to the house that first night. It was one of those McMansions, all perfect lawns and gleaming windows. As I approached the door, pizza in hand, I noticed the curtains twitch. Someone had been watching for me. The door opened before I could knock, and I found myself face to face with a middle-aged woman. Her hair was a mess, dark circles under her eyes, and she was wearing what looked like a designer nightgown. "Thank God you're here," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She thrust a handful of bills at me, grabbed the pizza, and slammed the door shut. I stood there for a moment, stunned. The whole interaction couldn't have lasted more than 10 seconds. As I walked back to my car, I glanced over my shoulder. Through a gap in the curtains, I could have sworn I saw a man's face watching me. But before I could get a good look, the curtain fell back into place. The next night, same thing. 3 a.m. on the dot, same order, same address. Only this time, it wasn't the woman who answered the door. It was a teenage boy, maybe 16 or 17. He looked terrified, his eyes darting back and forth as if checking to see if anyone was watching. "Please," he said, his voice cracking. "You have to—" But before he could finish, a hand appeared from inside the house, yanking him back. The door slammed shut, leaving me standing there with the pizza and more questions than answers. Night 3, an elderly man, his hands shaking as he took the pizza. Night 4, a young woman, tears streaming down her face. And now, here I was, pulling up to 742 Evergreen Terrace for the 5th time. But tonight was different. Tonight, I had a plan. As I approached the door, pizza in one hand and my phone in the other, I steeled myself for whatever might happen. I'd already dialed 911. All I had to do was press call if things went south. The door opened, and this time I was prepared for anything, or so I thought. The man standing before me was impeccably dressed in a suit that probably cost more than my car. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Those eyes, they were cold, calculating, like a predator sizing up its prey. "Ah, right on time," he said smoothly. "I do appreciate punctuality." I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. "1 large cheese pizza. That'll be $15.99. He chuckled, reaching into his pocket. "Of course, and I assume you have some questions for me, Sarah?" The use of my name sent a chill down my spine. I hadn't worn my name tag in weeks. "How do you know your name?" He finished for me. "I know quite a lot about you, Sarah. Top of your class at community college, studying to be a nurse. Youngest of 3, parents divorced when you were 12. You have a cat named Whiskers and a crippling fear of heights. Am I missing anything?" My mouth went dry. This was impossible. How could he know all of this? The man's smile widened, showing too many teeth. "You see, Sarah, I've been watching you, just as I've been watching everyone in this quaint little town, and I must say, you've proven to be far more persistent than the others." My hand tightened around my phone. One press and help would be on the way. But something held me back. Curiosity, stupidity, maybe a bit of both. "Who are you?" I managed to ask. "What's going on in this house?" He laughed, a sound devoid of any real mirth. Straight to the point. I like that. Very well, Sarah. Why don't you come inside and I'll explain everything. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to get in my car and drive as far away as possible, but I couldn't. Not without answers, not without knowing what had happened to the others, the woman, the boy, the old man, the crying girl. I stepped over the threshold, the door closing behind me with a soft click that sounded far too final. The interior of the house was immaculate. Pristine white carpets, expensive-looking art on the walls, not a speck of dust in sight. It was perfect. Too perfect. The man led me to a spacious living room, gesturing for me to sit on a leather couch that probably cost more than my yearly salary. He remained standing, looming over me. "You asked who I am," he began, his voice taking on an almost hypnotic quality. "I've had many names over the years, but you can call me Mr. Smith. As for what's going on here, well, that's a bit more complicated." He began to pace, his polished shoes clicking against the hardwood floor. "You see, Sarah, this house, it's not just a house. It's a nexus point, a place where the fabric of reality is thin. And I'm its caretaker." I blinked, trying to process what he was saying. "I don't understand." "Of course you don't," he said, not unkindly. "How could you? You've spent your whole life in a world of solid rules and fixed boundaries. But the truth is, reality is far more flexible than most people realize." He stopped pacing, fixing me with those unsettling eyes. "The people you've seen here, the woman, the boy, the others, they're not from your world, Sarah. They're travelers, lost souls who've slipped through the cracks between realities. And it's my job to help them find their way home." My mind reeled. This couldn't be real. Alternate realities, lost souls. It sounded like something out of a sci-fi novel. "You don't believe me," Mr. Smith said, reading my expression. "That's understandable. Perhaps a demonstration is in order." He snapped his fingers, and suddenly the room around us began to shift. The walls seemed to ripple like water, colors bleeding and swirling. I felt a wave of vertigo wash over me, and I gripped the edges of the couch to steady myself. When the world settled again, we were no longer in the living room. We were standing on a cliff overlooking a vast alien landscape. 2 moons hung in a purple sky, and in the distance, I could see what looked like a city of crystalline spires. I stumbled back, my heart pounding. This isn't possible." Mr. Smith smiled that unsettling smile again. "And yet here we are, one of countless realities, Sarah. Beautiful, isn't it?" Before I could respond, he snapped his fingers again, and we were back in the living room. I fell back onto the couch, my legs unable to support me. "Why?" I swallowed, trying to find my voice. "Why are you showing me this? Why me?" Mr. Smith's expression turned serious. "Because, Sarah, I need your help. The barriers between worlds are weakening. More and more lost souls are slipping through, and I can't keep up. I need someone to assist me, someone with compassion and intelligence. Someone like you." I shook my head, overwhelmed. "This is insane. I'm just a pizza delivery girl. I'm nobody special." "Oh, but you are," he insisted. "You noticed the pattern. You cared enough to investigate. That makes you very special indeed." He extended a hand to me. "Join me, Sarah. Help me guide these lost souls home. In return, I can show you wonders beyond your wildest imagination. What do you say?" I stared at his outstretched hand, my mind a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts and emotions. Part of me was screaming to run, to forget everything I'd seen and go back to my normal life. But another part of me was thrilled, excited. This was beyond anything I could have ever dreamed of. A chance to see other worlds, to help people in a way I never thought possible. Slowly, hesitantly, I reached out and took his hand. Mr. Smith's smile widened. "Excellent choice, Sarah. Welcome to your new reality." As he spoke those words, the world around us began to shift again. But this time, I wasn't afraid. This time, I was ready for whatever came next. After all, it beat delivering pizzas. I never thought a pepperoni pizza could save a life. But on that muggy Tuesday night, as I stood on the porch of 1845 Sycamore Lane, Everything I thought I knew about my mundane job as a pizza delivery driver was about to change. My name's Alex, and I've been slinging pies for Mario's Pizza for the past 2 years to pay my way through college. It's usually a pretty straightforward gig drive, deliver, collect tips, repeat. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened that night. The call came in around 9:30 p.m., just as I was thinking about calling it quits for the evening. 1 large pepperoni pizza, extra cheese, to 1845 Sycamore Lane. It was a nice neighborhood, the kind with manicured lawns and 2-car garages, the type of place where you'd expect good tips and zero drama. As I pulled up to the house, everything seemed normal at first glance. The porch light was on, and I could see the flicker of a TV through the living room window. But as I got out of my car, pizza in hand, I noticed something off. The curtains in one of the upstairs windows moved, just slightly, and for a brief moment, I saw a face. A woman, her eyes wide with what looked like fear. I shook it off. Probably just my imagination running wild after binge-watching too many true crime documentaries. I walked up to the front door and rang the bell. The man who answered looked completely ordinary. Mid-40s, slightly balding, wearing a polo shirt and khakis. He smiled, but something about it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Hey there," he said, his voice jovial but with an undercurrent of something I couldn't quite place. "How much do I owe you?" I told him the total, and he nodded, reaching into his pocket for his wallet. As he did, I caught a glimpse past him into the house. In the hallway mirror, I saw a reflection that made my blood run cold. A woman and 2 children huddled together on the living room floor, and behind them, partially obscured, was what looked like the barrel of a gun. My heart started racing, but I forced myself to keep a neutral expression. The man handed me the money, his smile never wavering. "Keep the change," he said. "You have a good night now." As he began to close the door, I heard it. Faint, barely audible but unmistakable, a muffled whimper. In that split second, I had to make a decision. Walk away and pretend I hadn't seen or heard anything, or potentially risk my life for strangers? "Actually, sir," I heard myself say, surprising even myself, "I think there might be a problem with your order. Mind if I check the pizza real quick?" The man's smile faltered for just a moment before he plastered it back on. "Oh? What seems to be the issue?" I opened the box, pretending to inspect the pizza. My mind was racing, trying to figure out what to do next. I needed to buy time, to find a way to alert someone without tipping off this guy. "Ah, yeah, see here." I pointed at a completely fine section of the pizza. "Looks like the cheese got a bit burnt. Tell you what, let me call this in and get you a fresh one made. No extra charge, of course." The man's eyes narrowed slightly. "That won't be necessary. This one looks fine to me." I forced a laugh, trying to keep my voice steady. No, I insist. Mario would have my head if I let a subpar pizza leave on my watch. It'll only take about 20 minutes. I'll run back and grab you a fresh one." As I spoke, I subtly reached into my pocket, feeling for my phone. If I could just send a quick text to my manager. The man's hand suddenly shot out, gripping my wrist with surprising strength. His facade dropped, revealing a cold, hard stare. "I said," he growled, "the pizza is fine. Now why don't you come inside? I think we need to have a little chat." My heart felt like it was going to burst out of my chest. I knew I should run, but my feet felt rooted to the spot. The man pulled me inside, slamming the door behind us. In the living room, I saw them clearly now. A woman, probably the man's wife, and 2 kids, a boy around 12, and a girl who couldn't have been more than 8. They were huddled together on the floor, eyes wide with terror. The woman had a bruise forming on her cheek. Well, the man said, his voice dripping with menace. "Looks like we have an uninvited guest for dinner. Sit down, pizza boy. And don't even think about trying anything heroic." I sat on the edge of the couch, my mind racing. What was this guy's endgame? Why was he holding his own family hostage? "Look," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, "I don't want any trouble. Just let me go, and I swear I won't say anything to anyone." The man laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "Oh, it's far too late for that. You've seen too much. Now empty your pockets. Phone, wallet, everything." With shaking hands, I did as he said. As I pulled out my phone, I managed to hit the emergency SOS button, a feature I'd set up but never thought I'd actually use. I just hoped it would work. The man snatched my belongings, tossing them onto a nearby table. Now here's what's going to happen. You're going to sit there quietly while I finish what I started, and if you're a good boy, maybe I'll let you walk out of here alive. Please, the woman suddenly spoke up, her voice trembling. Don't hurt him. He's just a kid. He has nothing to do with this. The man whirled on her, his face contorted with rage. Shut up! This is all your fault anyway. If you hadn't been planning to leave me, none of this would be happening. As he berated his wife, I caught the eye of the young boy. He was scared, but there was also a glimmer of something else, determination. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, he nodded towards the kitchen. I followed his gaze and saw what he was indicating. A landline phone sitting on the counter. If I could just get to it. The man was still focused on his wife, waving the gun around as he ranted. I tensed, ready to make a move. Suddenly, the little girl started crying loudly. The man turned, momentarily distracted. It was now or never. I lunged for the kitchen, my hand closing around the phone. I managed to dial 911 before the man realized what was happening. You little... he snarled, raising the gun. What happened next was a blur. The boy, seizing the moment, tackled his father's legs. The woman grabbed for the gun. I heard a shot, deafeningly loud in the confined space, and felt a searing pain in my arm. But I didn't let go of the phone. 1845, Sycamore Lane. Ho! I yelled into the receiver. Hostage situation! Shots fired! The man roared in fury, struggling against his wife and son. The little girl was screaming. I felt dizzy, my arm throbbing where the bullet had grazed me. And then, like a miracle, I heard sirens in the distance. The next few minutes were chaos. The man, realizing it was over, tried to run. But his son, showing incredible bravery, tripped him up. By the time he regained his footing, the police were bursting through the door. As they tackled the man to the ground, I slumped against the kitchen counter, the adrenaline fading and the pain in my arm intensifying. The last thing I remember before passing out was the little girl hugging me, tears streaming down her face as she said, "Thank you," over and over. I woke up in the hospital a few hours later. The bullet had only grazed me, thankfully. The police told me the full story. The man had found out his wife was planning to leave him and had snapped, holding the family hostage and planning to kill them all before taking his own life. If I hadn't shown up when I did, if I hadn't noticed those small signs, I shudder to think what might have happened. The family visited me in the hospital the next day. The woman hugged me, tears in her eyes as she thanked me for saving their lives. The boy, grinning despite his black eye, told me I was better than any superhero. And the little girl gave me a crayon drawing of me in a cape, delivering a pizza. As I looked at their grateful faces, I realized something. Sometimes, being a hero doesn't mean having superpowers or a fancy costume. Sometimes it just means being observant, being brave, and being willing to help others even when it's scary. I may have started that night as just a pizza delivery guy, but I ended it as something more. And let me tell you, that feeling, it's better than any tip I've ever received. The beam of my flashlight cut through the inky darkness, illuminating a path through the silent streets. In that moment, I realized how much we take electricity for granted, but in the pitch black of a city-wide blackout, with only the stars above and my dying phone for company, I was about to learn that sometimes the real monsters emerge when the lights go out. My name's Mike, and I've been delivering pizzas for Big Slice for about a year now. It's a job that's seen me through some weird situations, but nothing could have prepared me for that night. The blackout hit around 9 p.m., plunging the entire city into darkness. Most businesses closed up shop, but not Big Slice. Our boss, Tony, was determined to keep delivering. People gotta eat, blackout or not, he'd said, handing out flashlights. So there I was, navigating the eerily quiet streets, my car's headlights the only source of illumination for blocks. The pizzas in my passenger seat were getting cold, but I was determined to complete my deliveries. Call it pride, stubbornness, or just plain idiocy. I wasn't about to let a little thing like a total loss of power stop me. I pulled up to my next delivery address, 1313 Mockingbird Lane. Even in the darkness, I could tell it was one of those old Victorian houses, the kind that always seems a little creepy even in broad daylight. Now, with only my flashlight to guide me, it looked downright sinister. As I approached the front door, pizza bag in one hand and flashlight in the other, I noticed something odd. While every other house on the street was dark, this one had a faint glow coming from one of the upstairs windows. Candles, maybe? Or perhaps they had a generator. I rang the doorbell, forgetting for a moment that it probably wouldn't work without power. After a few seconds of silence, I knocked instead. No answer. I was about to knock again when I heard it, a scream. High-pitched and terrified, it cut through the silence like a knife. It had come from inside the house. My heart started racing. What should I do? Call the police? But my phone was almost dead, and with the blackout, who knew how long it would take them to respond? I could just leave, pretend I hadn't heard anything. But could I really live with myself if I did that? Before I could make a decision, the door creaked open. A woman stood there, her face illuminated by the candle she was holding. She looked to be in her mid-30s, with disheveled brown hair and wide, frightened eyes. "Yes," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I cleared my throat. Pizza delivery for 1313 Mockingbird Lane?" She looked confused for a moment. Then understanding dawned on her face. "Oh, right, the pizza. I forgot. With the blackout and everything, something felt off." Her reaction seemed delayed, rehearsed almost, and there was a tremor in her voice that didn't seem to be just from surprise. "Is everything okay, ma'am?" I asked, trying to peer past her into the house. "I thought I heard a scream." She flinched, almost imperceptibly. "Oh, that was probably just my daughter. She's scared of the dark. Nothing to worry about." As she spoke, I noticed a bruise forming on her cheek, partially hidden by her hair. A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the cool night air. "Right," I said, not believing a word. "Well, that'll be $15.50. She nodded, reaching into her pocket for money. As she did, her sleeve rode up slightly, revealing more bruises on her wrist. My suspicions deepened. Something was very wrong here. As she handed me the money, her eyes met mine. In that brief moment, I saw a silent plea. "Help me," they seemed to say. I was about to say something when a man's voice boomed from inside the house. "Who's at the door?" The woman flinched again, more noticeably this time. "It's just the pizza delivery, honey," she called back, her voice strained. Heavy footsteps approached, and a large man appeared behind the woman. He was easily 6 feet tall, with a build that suggested he spent a lot of time at the gym. But it was his eyes that caught my attention, cold and hard, with a glint of something dangerous. "Pizza, huh?" he said, looking me up and down. "Didn't think anyone would be delivering in a blackout." I forced a smile. "Yeah, well, people gotta eat, right?" He grunted, then turned to the woman. "Pay the man and come back inside. We were in the middle of something." The threat in his voice was unmistakable. The woman handed me the money with shaking hands, her eyes once again silently begging for help. As they turned to go back inside, I made a split-second decision. It was probably stupid, definitely dangerous, but I couldn't just walk away. "Actually," I said, "there seems to be a problem with your order. Mind if I come in and check on—" The man turned back, his eyes narrowing. "What kind of problem?" I scrambled for an excuse. Looks like we might have given you the wrong toppings. I just need to double-check the order on my phone. It'll only take a minute." He stared at me for what felt like an eternity, then shrugged. "Fine, make it quick." As I stepped inside, I surreptitiously pressed the emergency SOS button on my phone, praying it had enough battery left to send out an alert. The interior of the house was dimly lit by candles, casting long shadows on the walls. I followed them into the living room, my eyes darting around, looking for any signs of the child I'd heard scream earlier. "So," the man said, his tone casual but with an undercurrent of menace, "what seems to be the problem with our pizza?" I opened the box, pretending to inspect it while my mind raced, trying to figure out what to do next. That's when I saw it. a small face peeking out from behind a partially open closet door. A little girl, couldn't have been more than 6 or 7, with tears streaming down her face. Our eyes met, and I gave her a small, reassuring nod. Then I turned back to the man. "You know what? My mistake. The order looks fine. Sorry for the inconvenience." I started to back towards the door, but the man stepped in front of me, blocking my path. "Now hold on," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You come into my house, disrupt my evening, and now you're just going to leave? I don't think so." He took a step towards me, his fists clenched. The woman let out a small whimper. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure they could hear it, but I stood my ground. "Sir, I don't want any trouble. I'm just trying to do my job." "Your job?" he sneered. "Your job is delivering pizzas, not sticking your nose where it doesn't belong. I think it's time you learned a lesson about minding your own business." He lunged at me, but I was ready. I ducked under his swing and shoved the pizza box into his face. Hot cheese and sauce splattered everywhere, momentarily blinding him. "Run!" I yelled to the woman and the little girl. "Get out of here!" The woman hesitated for a split second, then grabbed her daughter and bolted for the door. The man, recovering from his pizza facial, roared in anger and came at me again. This time his fist connected with my jaw, sending me sprawling. Stars exploded in my vision, and I tasted blood. But I scrambled to my feet, knowing I needed to buy time for the woman and her daughter to escape. We grappled in the darkness, knocking over furniture and sending candles flying. He was stronger than me, but I was quicker, and desperation lent me strength I didn't know I had. Just when I thought I couldn't hold out any longer, I heard the most beautiful sound in the world: police sirens. The man froze, his hands around my throat. "You," he growled. "You called them—" Before I could respond, the front door burst open. Flashlight beams cut through the darkness, and authoritative voices filled the air. "Police! Freeze!" The man released me, raising his hands slowly. As the officers handcuffed him, I slumped against the wall, exhausted and in pain, but alive. Outside, I found the woman and her daughter wrapped in blankets in the back of an ambulance. When she saw me, the woman rushed over, tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she said, hugging me tightly. "You saved us. How can we ever repay you?" I managed to smile, wincing at the pain in my jaw. "No need. It's all part of the service." Although, I added, looking ruefully at my ruined uniform, "I think I might be looking for a new job after tonight." As the adrenaline wore off and the reality of what had happened sank in, I realized something. In all my time delivering pizzas, I'd never felt like I'd made a real difference in someone's life. But tonight, in the midst of a citywide blackout, I'd done more than just deliver a pizza. I delivered hope, and somehow that made all the craziness worth it. The next time the power goes out, I might just stay home. But I'll always remember the night when a simple pizza delivery turned into something much more. Because sometimes, even in the darkest of times, a little courage can light the way. The voice on the other end of the line was barely a whisper, choked with tears and desperation. "I can't do this anymore. I just want it to end." In that moment, I realized that the next few minutes could mean the difference between life and death. And all I had was a pizza order form and a phone that was never meant for this kind of call. "My name's Jamie, and I've been working the night shift at Pronto Pizza for about 6 months now. It's usually a pretty quiet gig, take orders, dispatch drivers, maybe deal with the occasional drunk customer, but nothing could have prepared me for what happened that night. It was around 2 a.m., that dead zone where even the party crowd has mostly gone to bed. But it's too early for the breakfast rush. I was idly scrolling through my phone, half listening to the late-night radio show playing softly in the background, when the phone rang. I answered with my usual cheery spiel. "Thank you for calling Pronto Pizza, where it's always pizza time. How can I help you tonight?" There was silence on the other end, then a shaky intake of breath, and then those words that would change everything. "I can't do this anymore. I just want it to end." For a moment I was stunned. This definitely wasn't a pizza order. My first thought was that someone had dialed the wrong number. But as I listened to the ragged breathing on the other end of the line, I realized this was no mistake. This person needed help, and for some reason, They'd reached out to a pizza place. "Hey," I said softly, abandoning my customer service voice. "I hear you. It sounds like you're going through a really tough time. Can you tell me what's going on?" The voice, a man's, I realized, let out a sob. "Everything's falling apart. I lost my job, my wife left me, took the kids. I've got nothing left. I can't see any way out." My heart was racing. I'd never been in a situation like this before. What was I supposed to say? What if I said the wrong thing? But I knew I couldn't just hang up. This person needed help, and right now, I was the only one they were talking to. "I'm so sorry you're going through all that," I said, trying to keep my voice calm and steady. "It sounds incredibly painful, but I want you to know that you're not alone. There are people who can help. Have you thought about calling a suicide hotline?" He laughed bitterly. I tried. The line was busy. Can you believe that? Even they don't have time for me. I felt a chill run down my spine. This was serious. I needed to keep him talking, keep him engaged, while I figured out what to do. "Well, I have time for you," I said. "I'm here and I'm listening. Can you tell me your name?" There was a pause, and for a heart-stopping moment, I thought he might have hung up. Then, "It's Tom." "Hi, Tom," I said, relief flooding through me. "I'm Jamie. It's good to meet you, even under these circumstances. Can I ask where you are right now, Tom?" "I'm at home," he said. "Or what's left of it. Sitting in my kitchen staring at these damn bills I can't pay." As he spoke, I was frantically scribbling notes. Home, kitchen, bills, anything that might help if I needed to call for help. But I also knew I needed to keep him talking, keep him connected. "That sounds really overwhelming, Tom. But you know what? The fact that you reached out, even if it was to a pizza place, shows that part of you wants to keep going. That's incredibly brave." He sniffled. "I don't feel brave. I feel pathetic." "You're not pathetic, Tom. You're a human being going through an incredibly difficult time. But difficult times don't last forever, even if it feels like they will right now." As I spoke, a thought nagged at the back of my mind. Tom. The name was familiar, and then it hit me. Tom Henderson, one of our regular customers. Always ordered the same thing, large pepperoni, extra cheese, every Friday night. He'd always been polite, left good tips. I'd even joked with him a few times when I'd taken his order. The realization made my throat tighten. This wasn't just some anonymous voice on the phone anymore. This was someone I knew, at least a little bit. Someone who'd always seemed so normal, so put together. It was a stark reminder that you never really know what someone else is going through. "Tom," I said, my voice gentle, "I think I recognize your voice. You order from us pretty often, right? Large pepperoni with extra cheese?" There was a pause, then a surprised laugh that sounded more like a sob. "Yeah, that's me, Friday night tradition. At least it used to be, when I had someone to share it with." "Well, how about we start a new tradition?" I said, an idea forming. "It doesn't have to be pizza, it could be anything. Something to look forward to each week. What do you think?" "I don't know," he said, his voice uncertain. "I'm not sure I can look forward to anything right now." "That's okay," I assured him. "It doesn't have to be big. Maybe just a walk in the park or trying a new recipe. Small steps, you know." As I talked, I was also texting my manager, explaining the situation as best I could. We needed to get professional help for Tom, but I was terrified of losing his trust if I told him I was calling someone. "I guess I could try," Tom said, his voice a little steadier. "I used to enjoy cooking before everything." "That's great, Tom. Cooking can be really therapeutic. And hey, if you ever want to share a recipe or talk about what you've made, you can always call here. I work most nights, and I'd love to hear about it." I heard a deep breath on the other end of the line. "You'd really want to hear from me again? After this?" "Absolutely," I said, and I meant it. "You're not just an order number to us, Tom. You're a person, and you matter." Just then, I saw my manager give me a thumbs up. He'd managed to contact emergency services, and they were on their way to Tom's address, which we had on file from his previous orders. "Tom," I said carefully, "I want you to know that I've really enjoyed talking with you tonight. And I also want you to know that there are people on their way to help you. Professional people who can provide the support you need right now. Is that okay? There was a long pause, and I held my breath, worried he might panic or hang up. But then I heard a shaky exhale. Yeah, he said quietly. Yeah, I think that's okay. I'm kind of glad, actually. I don't want to be alone right now. Relief washed over me. You're not alone, Tom. Not anymore. I'm going to stay on the line with you until they get there, okay? We can talk about anything you want. And so we talked. About his kids, about his favorite movies, about the time he tried to make a pizza from scratch and ended up with what he called a cheese and tomato pancake. By the time I heard a knock on his door and voices in the background, Tom's voice was steadier, his breathing calmer. They're here, he said. Thank you, Jamie, for everything. You're welcome, Tom, I said, feeling a lump in my throat. Remember, you can always call here if you need to talk, and I expect to hear about that new recipe next week, okay? He let out a small laugh, the first genuine one I'd heard all night. Okay, I promise. After the call ended, I sat there for a long time, the events of the night replaying in my head. When I'd started my shift, I never could have imagined I'd end up talking someone back from the brink. It was terrifying, exhausting, and yet somehow uplifting. In the days that followed, I couldn't stop thinking about Tom. I hoped he was getting the help he needed, that he was starting to see a way forward, and I found myself paying closer attention to our regular customers, wondering what unseen battles they might be fighting. A week later, the phone rang just as I was about to end my shift. Thank you for calling Pronto Pizza, where it's always pizza time. How can I help you? Hi, Jamie, came a familiar voice. It's Tom. I made lasagna tonight. Thought you might want to hear about it. As I settled in to listen, a smile spread across my face. Sometimes a wrong number can turn out to be exactly the right one, and sometimes a simple pizza order can become so much more.